This building in Compton, California, is a farm with no soil, no rain, and no sun anywhere inside it. It's a vertical farm, 4 stories of steel towers stacked to the ceiling, growing food indoors under artificial light. And it cost almost $1 billion to build. The company was called Plenty.
I'm the Chief Executive of Plenty. We're here in Compton at our flagship farm, the largest vertical farm in the world, growing the best leafy greens. This is definitely a new way of thinking about farming, but at the end of the day, what we do with all this advanced technology is only in service of making the very best possible food people can consume. So you'll be your own judge of whether the food tastes better, fresher, whether it's more nutritious, whether you want to feed it to yourself and your families.
It was backed by some of the most powerful names on earth. Jeff Bezos put in his own money. So did SoftBank. Walmart signed a deal to buy the food before a single plant was even grown. The promise was simple: feed America's cities from the inside, and never let the weather get a vote again. This was supposed to be the future of food. 5 years later, Plenty was bankrupt, and every one of these towers went dark. And here's the strange part. The business that crawled out of the wreckage only survived by growing one thing nobody saw coming.
It's a new, generation of farming. We have a pretty broad spread, but really the mainstream ones include lettuces, they include arugula or rocket as it's sometimes called. We also have our flagship product is spinach. So we've worked for many years to figure out.
We'll get to that. First, the obvious question. How do you burn through nearly $1 billion growing lettuce? Look at these towers again. Around $940 million flowed into this idea since 2014. That is not a startup's seed money. That is the price of a small city's worth of infrastructure. And it all rested on one promise that sounded almost too clean to argue with. Start with the problem they set out to kill. Growing lettuce the normal way eats land, water, and fuel. And out in the American West, the water is running low, the wells are dropping, and every dry summer makes it worse. So, Plenty pitched an answer that sounded like science fiction. Don't fight the drought. Escape it. Move the entire farm indoors, stack the crops toward the ceiling like shelves in a warehouse, and shrink 100 acres of field down to the size of a single room. The plants would climb toward glowing walls of pink and purple light instead of the sun. The roots would drink a fine mist instead of soil. And the company claimed 1 acre inside these walls could outgrow hundreds of acres outside. That pitch pulled in people who do not normally think about salad. Jeff Bezos backed it personally. In 2017, SoftBank's Vision Fund led a $200 million round, and Google's former chairman Eric Schmidt came in through his own investment firm. Then, in January 2022, the biggest name of all signed on: Walmart. Not just as an investor inside a $400 million round, but as a customer, agreeing to buy leafy greens straight out of the towers and put them on store shelves. A science fair pitch had turned into a Walmart supply contract. And that contract turned Plenty into a company, supposedly worth almost $2 billion. So why did some of the smartest money on earth bet this big on a room full of lettuce? Because the sales pitch felt bulletproof. Food grown a few blocks from the store instead of trucked 3,000 miles from Arizona. A harvest that couldn't be wiped out by a heat wave, a frost, or a bad season. Because there were no seasons in here at all. To investors watching droughts and wildfires hammer regular farms, this looked less like a gamble and more like an insurance policy that paid you back. And for a while, it really did look like it was working. Because inside, the machine was real. These weren't drawings. Towers packed floor to ceiling with LED lights, tuned to the exact colors a plant grows fastest under. Water pumped in a closed loop, used and reused instead of soaking into the ground. The company said it grew food on a fraction of the water and land a normal farm needs. The Compton facility opened in May 2023 for one job and one job only. Fill that Walmart order. On paper, it all worked, but the towers had a problem the spreadsheets hadn't caught yet. and it was humming quietly in the background the entire time. Here's the first clue. Plenty wasn't running one site. It was running two. While Compton grew the food, a second lab up in Laramie, Wyoming, did nothing but study the plants themselves, tweaking the biology like engineers tuning a car. That tells you something about how this company thought. It wasn't treating a crop like a harvest. It was treating it like a tech product. And running two operations at once, one growing, one experimenting, meant it was burning cash on two fires at the same time. In 2022, nobody blinked. Money was cheap and indoor farming was the exciting new thing. That mood was about to change fast. By the time the dust settled on that big 2022 round, Plenty was valued at $1.9 billion, and it was sitting on roughly $940 million, raised over 8 years, from SoftBank, from Bezos, from Walmart, from a long line of investors all betting this could grow the way a tech company grows. The towers in Compton were the proof they pointed to. But a tower is not an app. An app can serve 1 million more people for almost nothing. A tower can't. Every new shelf of plants you stack needs its own lights, its own cooling, its own slice of the power bill. Tech money had been poured into what was really a giant electrical machine. And there was one question nobody in those investor meetings was asking yet. The one about electricity. That question doesn't just come back later. It's the thing that ends the whole story. Nearly $1 billion sounds like enough to build something permanent. But spread it across 10 years of salaries, mountains of LED equipment, cooling systems, and construction that always costs more than planned, and it starts to behave less like a fortune and more like a bill that never stops arriving. Money came in through famous names. It went out through electricity, steel, and a workforce the company basically had to invent, because nobody on Earth had ever been trained to run a 4-story indoor tower farm. And the Walmart deal, the crown jewel, had a hidden catch. A promise to supply a giant retailer only works if the towers can produce that food cheaply, every single day without fail. The moment they couldn't, the whole valuation was standing on sand. And by 2024, the cracks were showing. Behind closed doors in early 2025, the company was reportedly talking about raising new money at a value that would have priced the old shares at under $15 million. Sit with that number. A company once worth nearly $2 billion, now being valued at a rounding error of that. More than 90% of its worth, gone in under 3 years. That kind of fall doesn't come from one bad quarter. It comes from something broken deep in the basic math of the business. The cost to grow the food was higher than what anyone would pay for it. And that same broken math is about to take down more than a dozen other companies right alongside Plenty. But first, the number at the center of it all. What did it actually cost to grow one head of this lettuce? Follow the electricity meter, not the marketing video. Out in a field, sunlight is free. Rain is free. The soil does its job for nothing. Inside these towers, you have to buy all of it. Buy the light with LED panels blazing 24 hours a day. Buy the climate with cooling systems fighting the outside world through sealed walls. Buy the water pressure with pumps pushing mist to every root. A regular farm gets that entire package from nature at no charge. An indoor farm pays for every watt of it. And that bill is not optional. It's physics. Then it got worse. By late 2024, Plenty's own leaders pointed straight at California's rising energy prices as a reason to shut Compton down. In December 2024, they did. Less than 2 years after it opened. The farm built specifically to feed Walmart went dark before it ever became reliably profitable. Put plainly, the light bill grew faster than the lettuce. Investment research firm PitchBook described the core problem in one blunt line. There was a gap between what the produce cost to grow and what shoppers would pay for it, and that gap never closed. No amount of clever engineering makes a person pay double for lettuce just because it was grown under a light bulb. So Plenty made a bet-the-company move. It walked away from lettuce and put its remaining chips on something far more expensive: strawberries. through a partnership with the berry giant Driscolls going all the way back to 2020. Plenty opened a new farm in Richmond, Virginia in September 2024. This was the crown of the whole vision, the first building of a campus. The company called the largest indoor farm site in the world, backed by a planned $300 million investment. And that one building was designed to grow more than 4 million pounds of strawberries a year, on towers 30 feet tall, in a space smaller than a big box store. Why strawberries? Simple. A strawberry sells for far more than a head of lettuce, and that higher price might finally cover the brutal cost of growing indoors. At least, that was the plan on paper. But the timing was cruel. The Compton shutdown left workers laid off, and those towers standing empty, a monument to a Walmart deal that never grew up. By California's own layoff filings, Plenty cut well over 100 jobs across its operations as it wound down. And nobody even tore the towers down. They just stopped. 4 silent stories of steel, a machine that ran out of road because it could never outrun its own power bill. Then, in March 2025, the company filed for bankruptcy in a Texas court, listing debts running into the hundreds of millions. It borrowed just over $20 million in emergency financing, the money a failing company is allowed to raise just to keep the doors open, and used it to keep only 2 things alive: the strawberry farm in Virginia and the research lab in Wyoming. And that choice tells you everything about what actually had value here. The strawberries, the last-ditch pivot, were the part worth saving, not the billion-dollar lettuce dream. Physics chose the survivor, not the pitch deck. And Plenty was not alone in learning that lesson the hard way. Bloomberg, TechCrunch, and PitchBook all trace the same pattern, and it's stretched across the entire industry. Bowery Farming, another indoor farming star, had already gone quiet in late 2024 after raising more than $700 million, and once being valued near $2.3 billion. AeroFarms had filed for bankruptcy back in June 2023, owing around $135 million and closing a plant in Virginia. AppHarvest went down a month later, buried under roughly $341 million in debt. One after another, the giants of the indoor farming boom hit the same wall. Now, to be fair, the believers have a real point. A sealed indoor farm genuinely uses less water and less land, and it genuinely doesn't care about drought, frost, or hail. That part was never a lie. The problem was underneath it. As PitchBook put it, the cost to grow always ran higher than the price people would pay. The business never found its floor, and one single force broke the whole industry, not just one company. Across 2025, industry trackers counted roughly 14 indoor farming companies going bankrupt. Every one of them ran into the same electricity bill. And here's why scale couldn't save them. When a tech company doubles in size, each new customer costs it almost nothing. When an indoor farm doubles in size, it just builds a second giant electrical machine that costs exactly as much to run as the first. There's no shortcut. Every new shelf of plants brings its own hungry bill. This matters far beyond one failed company. America keeps talking about growing more of its own food, close to home, safe from droughts and broken supply chains. Indoor farming was supposed to be that safety net, and its collapse proves the net had a hole in it. The idea solved the weather. It never solved the price. And roughly 14 bankrupt companies in a single year are the proof, standing in silent warehouses across the country. Which leaves the real cliffhanger. If the science actually works, but this first wave of companies couldn't survive the cost, then what does a version that finally works look like? And who's brave enough to fund it after watching more than $1 billion vanish once already? Because here's the twist that survived. That Richmond strawberry farm is still running today. Those berries still sell in Walmart stores under the Driscoll's Plenty Sweet name, right through the bankruptcy. The company officially climbed out of Chapter 11 On the 29th of May, 2025, roughly 2 months after it filed, with fresh money from One Madison Group and, once again, from SoftBank. And what survived tells the whole story in one image. The Compton lettuce towers, built for that massive Walmart deal, remain closed and dark. The strawberry farm lives. The old investors, the ones who put in nearly $1 billion, were wiped out completely. Their billion turned into about $30 million of fresh capital, just enough to keep the strawberries growing. That gap between what went in and what came out is the hard lesson at the center of this whole story. Investors bet on this like they bet on software, expecting it to double and double again. But physics doesn't move on an investor's timeline. Every light, every cooler, every square foot of that sealed room carries an energy cost that never shrinks, no matter how much money you throw at it. The lettuce side hit that wall first. The strawberry side found the one price high enough to survive it. And the bigger question is still wide open. The droughts aren't slowing down. The water in the West keeps dropping. The supply chains keep proving how fragile they are. We still need food that's grown close to home and doesn't depend on the weather, at a price a normal family can actually afford. Indoor farming solved the first half of that. It has not solved the second. And the graveyard of roughly 14 bankrupt farms from a single year is the evidence. Whether the next generation finds the right crop, the right place, and the right power source to finally close that gap is genuinely still unknown. Strawberries worked where lettuce failed. But nobody yet knows if that trick can scale up to feed an entire city instead of just stocking one shelf of premium berries. Follow along to see where this goes next. Because if the physics never changes, then either indoor farming survives only as a boutique for expensive fruit, or somewhere out there is a version of this dream still waiting to be built. One that finally closes the gap between what it costs to grow our food and what a city can actually afford to pay for it.